personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know right now. Today, I have a special guest on the show from Brussels, Belgium. Is that correct? John Arts, who is the co-founder of Rita Personal Data. John and I had a great conversation, great meeting a few days ago. And I said, oh, you should totally be on this podcast because I really love what you guys are doing with your product. And I really like the way that you're thinking about data of individuals in terms of how consumers can control their information. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you and a bit about the company?
Yes, thanks a lot, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here. So Rita's mission is quite straightforward. We want to put users back in control and give them ownership of their data. So the way we do that is that we allow users to, first of all, aggregate all of their information from multiple platforms. We then visualize it for them, and then we give them the tools to say yes and no to the companies that they want to have access to of their data. For us, the starting story was really on my co-founder and I not having a clear understanding of the data landscape. We were very curious of how are people using our data, what data is being collected, and who are they sharing it with. And that first step of curiosity was really core to our product development. And that's why we really wanted to give users transparency and really shed light on this whole industry. And that's what we do through visualizing data. And then the call to action in the mobile app is really to give users the choice. That company, yes, I have a relationship with, yes, I trust them, they can use my data. Others, I don't know, I don't interact with, delete my data. That is really our core premise.
Yeah, I think especially the GDPR, when the GDPR came out and we're seeing people or not companies, countries and different municipalities take bits and pieces from the GDPR is really interesting because I remember when the GDPR first came out and a lot of business people were just pulling their hair out about the whole consent issue. So, as you know, in the GDPR, there are 6 legal bases for moving data or using someone's data. And companies fought tooth and nail and are still fighting tooth and nail to use those other 5 basis, and they don't really want to go to consent. So I think it's interesting that you all are going for consent because, consent is fragile. As you know, people, can revoke consent. They can consent to certain things. So I think creating a situation where consent is not considered a dirty word is a great thing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, consent starts with transparency and understanding what you're opting into. And that's, again, why our users are just so excited by knowing, okay, this is what they're talking about when we're speaking about data. Because putting a big consent button on a web page, it doesn't mean much. It's not very tangible. People are clicking it away. We're really turning around that whole model and, first of all, giving the data to the users, giving them full accessibility to it, and then allowing them to also proactively make those decisions after the facts. So that's a bit the model that we rely on. It's interesting you say the GDPR because it was a big inspiration to my co-founder and I. When we started off, we were just so inspired by this transformative piece of legislation. And more precisely, the right to access. And that's also really where the name Rita comes from. And the right to access stipulates that every EU citizen has the right to request access to any company of their data and saying, hey, give me what you have on me. And that's the first thing he and I did, Skena and I did. We went to Google, we went to Facebook and say, hey, we now have this right, give me all the data you've got on me. And that was for us, again, purely for a curiosity purpose. But what that enables is really giving users ownership and putting it back in their hands. And that first step now is all around awareness, education, as you said, making consent a lot more understandable. But what we're going towards as a company in the future is really putting the user central in the data economy that is being built. And that's really what our users are after and what we believe the landscape should look like.
Yeah. There's a lot of controversy around cookies and how people do cookie banners.
Mm.
I when I'm in Europe, I get less cookie requests, right? Because you all have a law saying, people can only ask so many times, right? And we don't have that in the US. So we get bombarded with cookie stuff. And we don't even have cookie laws. So it's like when the GDPR came out, a lot of companies, they didn't want to separate, or they couldn't separate EU citizens or EU persons from people in the US. So they had done all these kind of blanket cookie things, and they're just out of hand, in my
Mm.
opinion. Especially every website you go to, it gives you an accept all option, and then they try to slow you down with, oh, make a preference. So you go into this other window, and then you have to make all these choices. And the thing I like about what you guys are doing is that you're allowing people to sit down and proactively decide who they want to choose to share their data with, as opposed to
Mhm.
you go on the internet and you want to do something, and then it's like this roadblock. You have to like answer all these questions, and as you know, a lot of people, just to get through it, they'll just say yes, because that's the easiest button that's there. Because it's not a yes or no. It's like a yes and maybe these other things. But if you're interacting with dozens of websites a day, that's like it just really is wearing on my mental health to have to actually make all these choices. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. The way we talk about it internally is kind of a trade-off between being privacy safe and convenience. You are taking more effort to operate on a privacy safe internet, whether it's the tools out there, whether it's going through the privacy policies and understanding the terms and conditions of which you're accepting cookies. And that's really why we promised ourselves, and we long debate with the designers there, to make privacy sexy and accessible, to kind of make it really smooth, understandable, so that the user can have both. Let's say operate in a privacy, interact with internet services in a privacy safe way, but also out of convenience. And it is a challenge, it is a challenge for even companies. I think in EU, what is really interesting to see is that some companies are taking that challenge head on and are really saying, hey, we can use this as a competitive advantage, create a very clear cookie banner, or even use some less invasive first-party tracking or even third-party cookie tracking. And those companies are benefiting from that. On the other hand, there's still a large majority of companies that are seeing this change in the landscape from a regulatory perspective, from a technology perspective, the banning of third-party cookies, and from a user perspective, and are not really seeing where the next 10 years will go, and still trying to attach to this, hey, we can still get data from first-party cookies. Let's try to get as much as we can. And some of them are doing it, like some data brokers are just making the terms and conditions increasingly more difficult, and making the letters even smaller and less understandable. So, one great example who's doing it well for us is the BBC in UK. They have inspired even us in the way we should be writing our privacy policy. It's so great to see that, these leaders and companies with quite a social mission and responsibility are doing it well, right? They are providing that transparency. And I think we'll see a bit of a gap for the first couple of years, and the companies that take privacy seriously as part of their mission and really care for the customer's privacy will be the ones that come out best.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree that BBC has a good policy. The Guardian has a great
Yeah.
one. Hearst is really good in terms of how they articulate their privacy policies and cookie stuff as well. I think that, I'll give you an example of something that we're dealing with in the US, which is kind of crazy. So, there is a heat wave going on right now in Texas, and the Texas power companies are adjusting the temperature of people's thermostats because for people who have smart thermostats and signed up to this kind of energy project. So, like, if your house is hot, let's say you go or sleep at night, they'll turn it up so it's hotter in your house, so you're using less energy. And a lot of people are really like outraged about this, even though if you read the fine print, a lot of them have agreed to this as part of this smart thermostat program or whatever. And a lot of people are opting out now. So to me, part of the problem, people say, oh, well, those people should have read those 80-page,
Hmm.
policies or whatever. And so to me, I think that I would love to get to a place where companies are, not writing 80-page policies. The people have to read because they know the people are not going to read those things. And I think if you have told them plainly, when you have a heat wave, we're going to control your smart meter and make it hotter in your house. So you're not going to have as much control over that stuff. I think people understand that. But, what are your thoughts about just companies trying to be or endeavoring to be more transparent and more clear about what they're offering and what are the trade-offs for individuals?
Yeah, so absolutely, clarity is everything. And as I said, it's a real challenge. And when we set up our privacy policy, we did that consulting industry experts, doing 4 iterations with our community, so that it becomes really crystal clear. And then the 2 sides, again, the trade-off that we ended up with is transparency on the one hand and understandability on the other, because you need to be very transparent, but the more transparent, the more granular you go into the explaining what you're doing, the less understandable it is users. So it is really a challenge. And we've written a blog about how we did it. I think looking at great use cases that are out there. For example, the Belgian government did also a fantastic use case explaining what data is actually going to be collected by the COVID-19 tracking app. Speaking to industry experts, there's so much research around this that we can learn a lot from. And then asking the community, asking the reader, is this clear? What is missing? Is it missing transparency? Is it missing understandability? And then just create a very personalized approach. So the high-level user wants to go through it really quickly. Another one will want to go into detail. They can go into detail. Now, on the case that you brought up in Texas, and what I'm curious about is to what degree is that manual adjustments of temperatures and temperatures in the houses of the customers, or is that all algorithmic?
It's
Because
all
then
algorithmic. So
yes.
because they have smart meters that are connected, they can actually manipulate those meters
Mm.
on a mass scale. So I don't have a smart meter, so because I like a dumb meter, one that I can control. But I think people who are getting those meters probably didn't fully understand that someone else can control the temperature in their house. They don't know what's happening in your house, right? They don't
Mm.
know what your temperature situation is, or you may have someone who's sick and needs cooling, or I think, to me, that's an example of kind of technology going awry, because you're making these blunt um, decisions about people without knowing exactly what their needs are.
Yeah, it is an interesting example, and I think one other case in which that happens is in Waze. And Waze was an interesting case because before Waze, in Belgium we call it the GPS, the global positioning system, that navigated drivers around streets. The system would always find either the shortest route or the fastest routes. And what Waze did for the first time was to split up certain people. to manage the traffic. And they would say, for example, if we both take the same route, they would send you one way and me another way, so that they mitigate traffic and don't send all of their users through the same streets and get too much traffic. So what that did for the first time is really making decisions for the user. They're choosing your way, and the algorithm is deciding whether you go that way or this way. One could say that has an immense implication on your life. Maybe you meet the partner of your life on a certain way and you didn't. So it is interesting to see increasingly algorithmic decision making. What becomes important there is the transparency, and then the user opting into that with full awareness of it. So we could reflect it back to the personalization story. We've got some users who really like personalization, but still want to control their data. There's other people that saying, I feel like I'm put inside a box and it limits my choice. I want some serendipity in the ads, in the content I see. So what I think the general takeaways from at least what we've found with our user base is that the more understanding you have on how the algorithm works, why a certain thing is recommended to you, or why an algorithm is making that decision, the more they are okay with it. Because, for example, if there's a really invasive ad, the question is, how did they get that data, right? It's all a mystery to me, and that's what makes it invasive. The more you educate that individual, and people are becoming more educated, saying, hey, don't you like a really personalized Netflix suggestion? Yes, we do. And that, okay, they'll need that data for it. And speaking to more marketing professionals or people that are more aware of the data algorithms behind it, they enjoy personalization, but they also want privacy. And so there's, again, a hard trade-off to manage both. And the answer to me is always transparency and education.
Yeah. I have, not to pick on any one service, movie service, but I have two different profiles on a service, and one has a woman's name and one has a man's name. And without me doing anything, they're suggesting different movies to me, which is troubling. Uh, so just because I'm a woman, that doesn't mean I want to watch all the bodice ripper, you know, romantic comedy things, or just because I'm a man doesn't mean I want to look at the shoot 'em up, bang bang stuff either. So I think, to me, I'm concerned about people being in silos. So you're in a box. They're putting you down a trail, and you can't really see anything else, but you don't know that there is anything else to see. So I feel like so many people on their journey, when they're looking at websites and stuff, it's just not apparent to them, like, all that there is out there. Like, they're being presented with the world as if this is everything. This is everything that there is to see, and it really isn't that way.
Yeah, it is a bit freaky, and I think what a lot of services will do in the future is to give two options, saying, hey, here's a personalized one and here's a completely randomized one, so you can explore both. What the optimal middle way for us is, and we offer this feature in our app, in which you can choose, you can see a list of all the interests that Google or Facebook use to target you. So it would say on my side, data marketing, and maybe something on blockchain, and I can restrict that interest. So that means if a user is constantly seeing these crypto or blockchain ads and they're tired of seeing it, they can go on Rita and say, hey, I don't want to see that anymore. And it's really a win-win for both the user and the marketeer, or the service provider offering a product or a service. And that choice and that active choosing, hey, I want to see this kind of content. Same with you on Netflix. One day you'll really be into a whole, let's say, history movies. You can actively choose that, and letting the user be part of the algorithm and saying, yes, I want serendipity. No, I want hyper personalization. So I think that's where the future is going.
Yeah. And I think, to me, should be the decade of transparency. So if companies don't understand anything, they should understand that, you know, people want more transparency into their data and how their data is used. So companies that are not or don't want to be transparent, they're going to fall behind because that's really what people want. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we touched upon it a few minutes ago briefly. But companies are also coming to us and asking, hey, you guys did a great job visualizing that and making that whole data journey of a user very understandable. How can we do the same? And those are going to be the winners. The way we see it internally is this shift of user-centric data and privacy awareness is really as big as the shift from in renewables and sustainable products and energy in the last 20 years. I mean, 2010, it was PetroChina and ExxonMobil at the top of a market cap globally. And just in 10 years, we saw that completely crumble because of sustainability trends and understanding of the global problem we're facing in that space. Then secondly, all the new technologies that are out there that can kind of replace their market dominance. And we see the same happening to big tech. We're not going to say they're going to fall, but it's crumbling, right? Really out of three pillars of change. First of all, being user awareness, which is incredibly powerful, technological changes, and then the regulatory tailwinds. That is really pushing on rights like right to access, the right to portability, allowing users to export their data from one service and import it into another. This is going to break down all of the existing silos in the data landscape. And we see that being as the largest change in the next 10 years. Really that shift towards, okay, data has become opaque and understandable to the user and non-controlled by the user, towards a whole movement of transparency and user control. The same way that the whole sustainability wave increased transparency and more ethical practices among companies. We see big.
Yeah. I think, businesses that are smart will embrace this and chase this, right? You want informed consumers. You want people that trust you. You want people to share information from, with you and get value from your service. So if you're doing that, I think up to this point, a lot of people have seen privacy as almost a tax on their business. They're like, oh, it's just another regulatory thing that I need to do. And it's not really about, your customer. So your customer can vote with their feet. They can move to other services. They can do other things. So if you want to have better relationship and better customer satisfaction, I think that has to be considered. It has to be, you have to consider the fact that, business companies or individuals want to trust or want, individuals don't mind sharing information with companies that they trust and they feel like they're getting a value. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the sort of the asymmetry of value, okay, as it relates to especially apps or services that are free. So there is, like if you go, I'm just pick on Facebook for today, but let's say, you have a Facebook account, let's say hypothetically, they earn $5,000 a year from you because of the stuff that they are able to collect for you. And then, you know, I would ask the question, am I getting $5,000 worth of value from Facebook? And the answer may be no, right? But there is this asymmetry that I feel like exists in certain applications when they're free, because you can, the sky is almost a limit to what people can consent to. So I think consent is like a huge center or issue that's coming up, and almost like this smart thermostat example. I'm sure that people, when right now while they're going through a heat wave, are thinking, this is not an even exchange. I don't feel like I don't feel like this service is giving me as much benefit as they get from me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there are asymmetries. There are huge asymmetries. I like the one that you brought up, value. I think the first one we touched upon already. It's the information asymmetry. Companies knowing so much about you, the end consumer, and you not knowing what they know, right? So there's huge downsides on a very societal level of having such an asymmetry between organizations and individuals. But then the value asymmetry is also an important one, because as we spend our days increasingly online, we generate value, and that value is really generated in two ways. That's one, the attention that we give to online platforms, and the second one is data. And the first one, the attention, is because a Google and a Facebook, they can present you with an ad, and they can increase their probability, the probability of you clicking on that ad by using your data. So these are quite two important pillars of the monetization. There's a great company out there, really an inspiration to us, Brave. It's a browser I use personally. And they have a token, which is the basic attention token. And you can kind of opt in to seeing ads, but you're the one who gets paid for seeing those ads. And there's a lot of other business models around there about the idea of monetizing your attention. You're monetizing the fact that you can see ads yourself. Now, the other side, and that's a bit really where our customer base is focused, driven us to focus on, is the monetization of data. And it's really that gold mine of that information, black on white. And that is therefore for us, next step is once we've aggregated that user data, stored it centrally on their devices and given them ownership, our customers have asked, I want to play an active role in the data market. I want to be able to share that data with brands that I'm loyal to, with brands that I trust, and get rewarded for the exchange. And that is the data economy side of the story. And that data economy is increasingly growing, right? The exchange of data between corporations themselves, but also the extraction of user data through all of these sources and monetizing that to organizations again. We're really going towards a data economy. And the way we see that, it's the user central in the decision-making and the capturing of the value of their own data. Because if you put it in their hands, you educate them, and then you put them in the driving seat of the choices, right? Saying, yes, this company, you can share it with, the other one, no. That would just be a fantastic future. And that's the one we're building.
Yeah. There seems to be, a lot of data privacy laws, and this again is highlighted in GDPR and other subsequent laws. And this is about kind of onward transfer or third party data sharing. So this includes data brokers and cookies and marketing and all this other type of stuff. So what I'm seeing is big companies trying to limit their third party risk with transferring data to third parties, and then I see marketers trying to create more first party relationships with
Mm-hmm.
individuals. So to me, I feel like that naturally is gonna dovetail right into monetization. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. That is the next step. We're seeing a $200 billion industry on third-party data, which is absolutely immense, which is, again, an opaque industry. People don't know much about it. We're seeing that one crumbling for the reasons you said. Organizations don't want to interact with them anymore for compliance risks. Regulatory and policymakers are behind them, and trying to put the user central and protect them. So organizations have moved to first party data, and there's some really great ways for them to collect that. But what we propose as an idea is zero party data, and the difference is really that first party data, a user can be informed about the data collection, but is not playing an active role in it. right? It's a lot of the clicks are being tracked on the website. The brand knows, okay, there's a X% dropout on the shopping cart and can find a correlation between the products they've previously seen. What we envision is a zero-party data platform in which consumers are proactively sharing that with brands, so that they are in control. They have the peace of mind, hey, I know what's happening here and I'm doing this actively. And brands then reward those consumers through any points of loyalty, whether it be a cashback, a discount. Some brands have spoken about exclusive access to new product lines or events. And that exchange, the zero-party exchange, would really allow for a whole new ecosystem to be built. Users play an active role. Brands get the insights directly from the user in a compliant way and in an engaging way. So that is really the win-win that in the longer run, our platform will enable.
Yeah. And I think too, when customers have a good relationship with these businesses, they give more accurate data. So I
Mhm.
know a lot of people give false data to companies they don't trust, or they or some companies, when they're doing this kind of third party snooping, they're making inferences that may not be true about the individual. So being able to have that relationship and that trust, means that this person says, okay, this brand is a value to me, and I'm willing to give them data that helps them help me, right?
Exactly, because if it's a brand you trust, you're very happy that they improve their services towards you. And that's exactly the trust relationship we're trying to build. The way we call it internally is really building privacy first relationships in a customer first era. So that is really changing around the whole mindset, and the brands that are fan of these or inspired by these are the ones that we discussed are going to be the winners of the future, because they think about this privacy movement as an opportunity and not as a pain point.
Yeah, right. I know that people are holding on tooth and nail to try to
Mm-hmm.
keep some of these old models, but it breaks down and it's not going to work
Mm-hmm.
in the future. So the
Just,
faster people get onto this train, the better they're going to be. Tell me a little bit about sort of, we've talked about your mission, right?
mhm.
With the company and the product. What is it, if anything, that you would like to change about, privacy or data in the future? What would you be trying to do?
It's really transforming the way it's transacted. I think that is the root problem in the industry. So going through those third parties is breaking consumer trust, limiting the full potential of data by all of these concerns. People trying to go through their settings, really having a pain there, dropping out or trying to do the data-centric requests, really suffering from, let's say, the complexity of managing your data. And then the brands increasingly have a need for new data sources. So what I would really love is, as we described, enable an exchange one-on-one, zero party in a trusted environment. Now, maybe on a more practical level, what we've found a difficult one is the execution of the right to be forgotten. A lot of consumers are writing out sending out right to be forgotten requests to companies, and the response rate is really bad. They're trying to avoid this. Some companies, not to name any names, are going so far that if a consumer asks them, hey, please delete my data, with the email address they use to sign up to the service, some companies are asking, can you please send over your ID card so we can identify you, which is
Right.
absurd, right? Because it's the principle of data minimization. And then a company is asking for more data, really sensitive data, through an insecure channel, which is email. So what I would love to see, and policymakers see this problem very clearly and will change, is a more standardized way of invoking those rights, and increasing the response rate for the user, because that would also, on the one hand, facilitate it for companies, facilitate it for users, but also enable a lot of new innovation in the space.
Yeah. I think, there has to be a paradigm shift. And I think, especially the right to be forgotten, the right to be forgotten is probably the most difficult thing that companies have had to grapple with because a lot of their data collection, even the applications that they use, they're not meant to forget.
Mhm.
They're built to remember. So some of these things makes it hard to even locate and even delete that data. So I think having ways that makes that data more transparent to the company so that they can fulfill these requests is really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Big ID does a tremendous job in that. There's
Yeah.
a
Yeah, I
lot.
love their product. I've loved their product for many years, and Dimitri, we're buds. So
Hmm.
he's a nice, very nice man, and I really like the way that they're thinking about the problem. I had him on the podcast actually not long ago, and he's great. Dimitri Sirota, who's the CEO of Big ID. Tell me, tell me what makes your product different and stand out in the consumer privacy space. I can tell
Yes.
you one thing where I think, oh, I like that you do.
Sorry.
So I like the fact that you show people what their data is worth. So this is the big question that no one wants to really
Mhm.
answer. And some people are very purist where they don't think you should assign a monetary value to data, but data
Mhm.
does have a value, right? Because companies are buying and selling data right and left. So I think in a way, being able to show that helps people visualize or make it more concrete about how data that they share just willingly may be of value to someone else. What are your thoughts?
No, no, absolutely. That is really a point of engagement for our customer, and where we are unique, it's the visualization. Because in the whole data ownership space, a lot of people have tried to crack it, and let's call it close to the data wallet value proposition. Not that many companies have really, it seems that they haven't really sat down that closely with the consumer to understand what is the need, what can drive engagement, what do they want to know, and how do we solve that problem. And we were really close with our ears to the ground, speaking to the consumer and finding out, okay, what do they want? So the first step that is really unique there is the visualization. The dashboard is really engaging. People are sharing that with friends. People are sharing it either with fellow privacy interested people saying, hey, have you seen this? But what is to me even more touching is that people are sharing it for education purposes. They're sending it to their mothers, to people of their family who are not that aware about the landscape, and saying, hey, you should really know this. You should be aware of this because it changes the way you interact with online services. So the visualization is, of course, step one. And currently, there is no product out there that allows users to say both yes and no to companies. There are products that can say, hey, restrict your data from this list of companies. And there's others that say, hey, you can share it with companies. This is something that a consumer wants in a single platform. And saying yes and no, and that choice and um, shit. um, the optionality is really what is for us key to control, right? Having the choice is what is meaning of control. So I think those two ways were really unique. And then finally, by leveraging the GDPR for the aggregation of data and the restriction of data.
Yeah, I really love that. I like that you're doing that. Plus, the way that things are happening now or have happened, um, in terms of how data is being collected from individuals, it's just not sustainable.
Mhm.
So I saw a statistic from FIDO Fast ID Online that said the average person has like 90 different usernames and passwords. So, can you imagine, going into every single account and trying to do this privacy dance where you're trying to configure all this stuff is just too much. So I think the future is people having management of their data almost like a bank, and then they pick and choose who has access because this is, you just can't continue this way. What are your thoughts?
No, no, absolutely. That is where it's going. And the way it should be going is in a very understandable and accessible way. Like the neobanks transformed the banking industry, Read as a data wallet will also make it really accessible and hopefully transform the data industry. It's the wallet story that's first, but the wallet needs to be packaged very nicely. You need a value proposition initially for the user to use the wallet, and then it's all about the transactions. How many transactions, either saying no or saying yes, can you do on the platform? So we see that as the straight line to success, and to growing to a user base that we can provide value to as many people as possible with this product.
Yeah. So if it was the world according to you, John, and we did everything that you said, what would be your wish for privacy, either, in Europe, anywhere in the world, about technology or even regulation? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the biggest wish, what I used to always say, even a few years ago, is that people go march on the streets for their privacy right, as they're doing for global warming issues. And that's been so nice to see it play out in the last couple of years. Global warming was a societal problem that became an individual's problem. Same with privacy. And it was always a societal problem, but the consumer never felt it. It was never tangible for them. And in the last couple of years, or even months, we've really felt that shift towards a personal problem. People are taking action, and that gap between consumer attitudes and consumer behavior has completely transformed. People are now actively looking for ways to take control. So that would be, I think, my dream, that everyone becomes aware of the value they're sharing and the risk they're taking by interacting with online services, and that they then take control.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, John. This was a thrilling conversation. I love the way that you're thinking about the problem. Me as a consumer as well, this definitely interests me. And I like the way that you all are approaching the problem, and your app is amazing.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
So we'll talk soon.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.